Hey, Denver.
How are you, Susan?
Doing good.
Good.
Okay, guys, so it's 5:01. We've got everybody on here. I just started recording it. I do know that Denver was joining us. Denver's not actually on this committee, but as the chair, I've been sending him every update. So he's in helping out. And then also we have Nathan, who's kind of jumping back into things, and he's going to be on board for this as well. In the meeting invite, I had a little bit of a rough agenda, and then really Susan has taken charge on this. She jumped right into that role of facilitator and has some great information out for you guys. So at this point in time, we have a couple of different things to do. But Susan, would you like to take it away, or would you like me to do just a little overview before we get going?
Let's do the overview, because that'll give us guidance on where we're heading.
You bet. So I think that, for this really, with the outreach committee, we wanted to come up with a good list of people and good ways to make sure that every election message gets out into the community. One of the things that's hard for us is we're hitting newspaper, we're hitting TV, we're hitting everything, and people still say, I don't know how to find out about that. And that's where this comes into play. So a few of the kind of administrative things that we needed to kind of come forward for was facilitator, note taker, and reporter. Susan jumped right into facilitator, helping keep people on topic and make sure that we've got a good list. I don't know for sure that we got a note taker or a reporter, and I'd be happy to volunteer as the note taker for this because I like to keep pretty good notes as well.
Todd had volunteered for reporter.
Todd, was that right? You did reporter, right?
I said that would work for me.
Perfect. And so I can take some notes, but when it comes back to the next meeting in April, we'll really kind of have you give the overview of what we discussed here and got it set up. And I think it's really nice to have a note taker who has access to the SharePoint and everything, so we can just get those plugged right in for you guys. If I'm not taking away somebody's glory here.
The note or the reporter might also give a brief synopsis to the rest of the EAC.
Yep, exactly. Like to the whole EAC about kind of what we discussed and where we go. Mm-hmm. So I'm just grabbing some quick notes here. That was the first part. The next thing that I wanted to discuss, we had sort of key takeaways from the survey, just to try and gear us towards this ongoing approach of making sure that that survey is that robust yearly project. And I'd just like to give everybody a little bit of a second. Christina, being on the call, has some amazing insight and great ideas about this. She's also on the research committee, which is diving in heavy to this. But then I feel like it'd be a good area to just kind of do a round robin and say, hey, what was your big takeaway on this? What do you think is our big area from the survey that we should be looking at in the future, or something we could have learned? So I can just run through this really quick and catch everybody, and I'll just do it in the order that I've got you guys on the screen. Josh, did you have anything in particular that you thought out of that survey was like your big takeaway, your big issue?
Man, I wish I did. Other than I feel like we do need it would behoove us to come up with some new techniques
to do outreach, to get
Yep. That feels like the standard things we're doing, but it's our challenge is to reach the hardest to reach people.
Yep, perfect. So then next on here, well, so I'll say mine, and mine's always a little bit different, and I expect it to be different than everybody on the EAC. Mine was, we had a small percentage of voters who did not feel confident in the process, and we need to help them understand what we're doing through outreach like this, so that they can understand our process, and then they will feel more confident in it. I mean, we're battling this right now. People who don't understand the process are confused and don't feel like the process is working correctly and that their vote is counted. And those are my biggest things to work on. Little bit different to tie it into this committee. It's really about how do we get this information to those who don't see that news article, what techniques, what other areas. Christina, I had you up next. Did you have kind of like a big takeaway from the survey that you felt?
Thanks, Brad. This is a tough one to sort of boil down for me, and I'm trying to think of a way that would be helpful since this is my area of research. But I guess that I would say a major takeaway for me is that the work that's being done is being done in a good way. That I wouldn't expect, especially during COVID-19 and the political season that we just had, that most election jurisdictions celebrate such large numbers of competent voters as here in Missoula. So I think the biggest takeaway for me is that the work that's been done supports, democratic ideals in our community and competence.
Yeah, and I think that that's it. And that's always my negative is like there's 8% that don't feel confident and there's 92% that really do.
Well, Brad, I'll remind you about how, sampling error works. And we know that we're plus or minus 4.2%. So we might even be down to like 2 or 3% of people.
Or up to 12. Oh, no. Denver, I had you next as we just kind of run through these. And then, Susan, once we get through this kind of aspect, I'll then pass it over to you.
You bet, Bradley. Thank you so much. So there were two things that stood out to me. One was just overwhelming support for vote by mail and the number of people that said they were either satisfied or extremely satisfied. Somewhere around 94%. That's incredible. And roughly the same amount said that they would be voting by mail in the future. So I think that's a really positive sign. The other thing that stood out to me was in Figure 7, when they're talking about the vote mode, support for drop box voting is highest in the younger ages, and support decreases with age. And I'm wondering if that does become a strategy that we can employ. Are there opportunities to target those kind of services in specific areas of our community to specific demographics?
Yeah. All right, note taking as well. Susan, I've got you up next on kind of our list here, just your takeaways from the survey.
I think that there was comment last time that one of the things the voters would like to see is an election booklet of some sort, electronic or hard copy, that people could refer to. But I don't know if that would be for issues only or for candidates also. In California, we had election pamphlets that were put out, and they had both candidate and issue information. That was really useful. The other thing is I'm curious to see what impact January 6th had on people's thoughts and feelings on the election process, if that changed any of the confidence people had in the election.
Yeah, good call there. And so just a quick editorialization. That one right there, that question made me feel so good because that was really a county produced election guide from the county. So that means that voters are overwhelmingly feel like we are unbiased. We are working to help make sure that everybody has access. And there's a big caution that the same reason that they trust us and want that could be damaged by providing a voter guide out. And so we can dig into that quite a bit more because there are issues with if somebody doesn't respond, the questions asked, all of these other areas. And so I saw that and thought, boy, this is a good area. Boy, in Missoula County, the two things that you want, voter guide and drop boxes are great, but those are tough areas to hit from the county and remain with that high confidence. And I'm going to dig in here Josh, I'm going to try and mute you really quick. I think you're cooking. I know you're cooking. So I love that, and I love seeing that, and that's a great area to kind of follow up on. And what about January 6th? What a good thing to look at kind of going forward. Has this last year changed people's outlook? And as we present forward a big plan to continue this, maybe that's part of what we recommend for a research committee is one of the questions. Okay, everybody still with me here? Todd, I've got you up next.
Yeah. I'm kind of with you. I wanted to attack that 8 or 10% that didn't have confidence because, you know, as when I participate in the audits, I realize how many checks and balances and verification, and obviously a lot of people, and even I think 10% is small compared to other parts of the country. So we're fortunate here in Missoula, but most people have no idea about all the accuracy checks that are built into the system. It's just, you know, they fill out their ballot and they have no idea of all the checks and balances that keep it accurate. So to me, I think that would, if that can be communicated in an entertaining and narrative fashion, I think that would go a long ways towards maintaining the confidence that we already have.
Yeah, great. And Nathan, jumping right back into things, if I can put you on the spot, did you have a takeaway from the survey?
Well, actually, a lot of the things that you've already discussed, like I really like Josh's perspective on it. There's some area that we're not hitting, and I would like to find that. What is the approach that we can take that we have yet, the road we haven't taken yet? And also, to your point, and basically what Todd just mentioned, a way to walk people through the entirety of the process so that it doesn't appear that elections happen as if by magic your ballot shows up and that's all there is to it. Something to walk people through the entirety of the process could possibly whittle away at that 8%. That's what I've got there for you, Bradley.
Hey, Bradley.
Yeah.
This is Susan. I was in Lions Club for a while, and Jack Schmidt, is that his last name?
Yep.
Jack is Mr. Elections after Bradley. And we had one meeting where Jack and I talked about the elections process of the pathway of a ballot. And I think people were really astounded at the checks and balances that are in place and how things are monitored from start to finish. And it was really informative. And I'm wondering if maybe something like that to some basic groups, the trick is to keep it interesting and not like sawdust.
Exactly. And this pulls it right back into, I'm always very excited about elections. Everybody here is very excited about elections. How do we share information that's easily digestible in a way to people who are excited about elections once or twice every 2 years?
Hey,
Bradley,
can you hear me? I can't tell if I'm.
Yep, you're good, Josh.
So I'm just remembering something from, I'm old, so this is a way back cultural reference, but used to be on Saturday morning cartoons, they would have these little 5-minute interesting civics lessons, and there was one called "How a Bill becomes a Law."
Just a bill on
remember that?
Hill.
Yeah, you got it, brother. You're not even that old, right? So how does a ballot become a vote?
And that's been something.
I could just imagine like a 2-minute animated video of this thing ballot bouncing along through all the checks and balances that Todd was talking about and landing somewhere where it's actually counted, and something catchy and easy and fun that lasts, less than 5 minutes, and something like that on video could be spread really widely. I mean, it might cost us a little bit of money to make, but I think that's okay. I don't think that
I would love that.
Need to close the door on that.
Yep. And so that is Oh, great. I got 2 hands up. So let's just jump right back into those, because that's kind of the gist of the whole point of this subcommittee. How do we create content? And we in the elections office can help create it. We just need a little guidance about sometimes the best ways to go. We're just now gearing up to do a video about destroying stuff after the election. So guess what? That ballot that became a vote doesn't get thrown away for 2 years. It has all of this other process that happens with it. But really trying to help, that was one of our biggest requests. Get us videos, something short that is a video that can be watched and is more achievable. During the cycle, we were able to get out a few about like Monty registering to vote. However, we need more. And so these are great areas. And then once we have them, how do we get them to everybody? So I'll just bump back through the list. I didn't see who was first, but I have Denver and then Susan.
Thanks, Bradley. Josh, I love your idea about doing a Schoolhouse Rock kind of video about how ballots get counted. I think that's a really creative idea. But the other direction, aside from trying to reach that 8 to 10% or whatever it is that is dissatisfied with elections, I think the other approach that we can take is through our outreach committee, building relationships with thought leaders in the community, that when there are attacks on the voting system and there are speculations that ballots were not counted properly or that something is amiss, those thought leaders who we've been building relationships with and been getting information to can step forward in a public way and say, no, these are the protections we have in place. This is how we know that ballots are getting counted appropriately. That shouldn't discount our efforts to try and persuade that 8 to 10%. But I think we have to recognize that other community leaders have stronger influence with those groups than necessarily the people in this committee.
I would agree with that, Denver, because I don't think it diminishes anything of trying to reduce that 8% number. I think building a base of support that you can rely on to maintain the level of confidence that we have, which is actually a lot larger than 8%. That's a great point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's kind of it. How do we create this content? How do we educate those people? And that really dives into a lot of what Susan was putting together for us. How do we get it out to them so that they know and are aware? Because we have these sort of issues come up all the time, and we have good people out there, but how do we get more? How do we get that person who's connected with that group that has the member who thinks that mail ballots are sent to every single person? Susan, I got you up next.
Yeah, I think one thing we need to keep in mind too is that 8% that have their doubts, they're interacting with the 92%. So though we may have a hard time getting directly to that 8%, if we can get to the 92% and get them better educated, they're going to be able to pass the information down, and also maybe turn it into a project that would be working with the university or some other group that would help us in putting together age appropriate pieces that would educate and entertain. And if you're entertaining them, you've got a different level of awareness of what's being said, I think.
Yep. So before we kind of pass this over to you, Susan, to talk about different groups, different outreach, and some of these areas to help us be a little bit more rounded, to know where we're going, I think that is an excellent area to tag on. And I think that one of the other things that we should always be looking at with this is, as we're putting this together, with these areas of specialization. So Susan emailed me today and was like, hey, I'm also on this subcommittee about canvassing. And forgive me, Susan, I couldn't remember if it was canvassing for sure.
Canvassing and ballot processing.
Yep. And this is exactly it. I have been running and doing a lot of catch up over the last months here, but I'm starting to do outreach to people in those areas of specialization. And when we start going through ballot processing, Susan, you have some very good experience being in election aid. but I want to work with you to create this content. And that's how I envision these areas of specialization coming in. So the big goal being that if your area of specialization is ballot processing and we're working to put together a video, I want you to be a part of that. And the goal out of an area of specialization is to be able to explain this process to somebody who doesn't necessarily have the elections background or knowledge. Is that 2 times a year, every other year voter? All right, so I've got Christina. Got you. Man, this is good. I'm trying to hand it off to you, Susan, but I was waiting to get this last one, all these questions and these through. So Christina.
Thanks, Bradley. Forgive me for this question. I'm a bit of a process person. So what I'm trying to understand, and I think I hinted at in the email sent around to this group, is a question of, are we taking a scattershot approach, a blanket approach to all people, all places, or do we want to be thinking about our charge to be about the underrepresented or unrepresented groups that make up our electorate? So I guess sort of I'm is it an outcome or an output? What are we, if there's any insight there, Bradley, it'd be really helpful for me.
Well, I think that Denver was really hitting on this, as when I get it really confused. Outreach, recruitment, it's all get people involved in elections. So what I sent to Susan was our list of every organization that we do outreach to around recruiting election judges. So these are faith groups, these are service groups, these are political party groups. But I really feel like the best guidance for this is, who are the connectors? So scattershot, but looking at who do we know who covers a larger group? So like, is there a meeting of different faith groups in Missoula that we could present to instead of presenting to each individual faith group? When we're talking about rural communities and other areas, one of the best areas that I've found to help is the all community council meeting, which covers a lot of different areas. And we got a great chance to do outreach with those groups and help provide them the materials. So those kind of connectors, those community leaders, but I think we need to focus both on who do we need to have this information to, what's the overarching group, and who are the 10 people who every election we should be reaching out to say, this is coming forward, this is an election area you should be informed about. And not just elections, but we're going to have some big changes that come out from this legislation. And how do we help get that message out to people through those main contacts, to those underserved communities? And so it's both lists. It's, hey, we want everybody, so that when we're doing an outreach that should cover every rock, every nook and cranny, let's get it. But also, who are the connectors? Who are the people who can help us get in touch with those larger groups, and specifically those different underserved communities and groups that need extra assistance?
Brad, I just want to make one plug for thinking a bit about the idea that's been written quite a bit about in my field, right, of less civic engagement by younger generations, and also by generations that don't have the wealth of white generations. And so thinking about who's involved in these groups may be more of the same people, right, that we already know are involved. So I just want to be mindful about ensuring equity in a way that's meaningful in terms of representation in the electorate, and knowing that, people who are involved in faith groups traditionally turn out to vote. It's community connectedness and ideas. Bowling Alone talks all about. So just to, I guess, a piece that I'm thinking about and hanging on to in this conversation.
Yeah, and I think that when you would, forgive me, I'm on so many different emails and I don't want to get them confused. When you were referencing really like the outreach amongst college age voters and the response differences, we see that as a group that needs specific outreach. And how do we help catch them? And we made some great connections through with this with ASUM, Office for Civic Engagement, and other community or campus oriented groups. You were on those calls with me that Friday, and I think that really helped, because that's a group that regularly does not turn out and vote in the same capacity. So yes, we need to focus on there. And then also with this, if we can get the most robust list we can, this is where I come from this from is election judge outreach, and it's leave no stone unturned. Who do you reach out to get the 650 judges we need to run a successful election? So I kind of get them confused, and I like both lists. But I think that when we're doing outreach that is around information on how to vote, where to vote, and the changes that may impact you, we need to be flagging bigger groups that can get that message out more, and those underserved, those rural communities, native populations, college kids, those aspects right there. And is that echoing what you were just saying as I'm taking notes?
Sorry, I had to figure out how to get my window back open. Yes, I think so. It'll be a piece that we keep coming back to, I think, because it's not only people, right, college students, which I mentioned, but also folks that maybe don't have permanent addresses, things like that.
Yep, perfect. So with that in mind, I think that the big goal from here is to try and help establish a list of groups and organizations that you guys feel need outreach, need that connection, whom can help us share that message. And, with this, I think what we can do is I'll hand this back over to Susan, who's gotten together some great info from you guys, looked at some of the larger outreach lists that we put together, and we can kind of focus, and I can have those two categories. That is the focused, and then the outreach list for outreach, and the outreach list for recruitment is essentially the way that I see that.
Bradley, what's the differentiation between somebody outreach for outreach and outreach for recruitment? Is recruitment election judges?
So recruitment would be election judges. Yep. Recruitment also applying to EAC members. We do a lot more robust with that, but that's our biggest outreach project. To get those 650, we want to hit every single group. So I think it is outreach areas and then election judge recruitment to just specify and clarify a little more. And so, Susan, what I'd love to do is kind of hand it over to you, take that working document that you've gotten together, really hit some of those contacts and groups, and all kind of track and see, which group might they fit better into. General outreach or recruitment for election judges, and some may definitely be both.
Okay.
Okay, so at this point in time, Susan, you had sent out some preliminary notes that had kind of covered it, and I think that would be a good spot to run through and kind of go through with the different communities and just sort of see, hey, which of these groups, where do you feel like they fit? And is there a good contact or somebody that that we can help get that all updated for?
Okay, so I was thinking that a good way to start is to be able to categorize these various groups into various categories, like educational or political or civic or whatever categories, and then we can start filling those slots with the list of names that people had submitted. Does that sound reasonable, doable to everybody? Yes, no, hate it, don't like it?
I love it. I was starting an Excel spreadsheet, but let me kind of defer to others.
That's good to me, Susan. Thank you.
Okay. So I would say civic would cover both business organizations, service organizations, various interest organizations. I put on the list the Missoula Quilt Guild, which when I put it on the list, I thought that sounded a little odd, but the Missoula Quilt Guild is 200 older ladies. It's a good audience, and a good audience that would get out there and talk about things. So some of the things on that list may seem kind of far-fetched, but I think there's still good potential there. Other categories that you guys would like to see on our list? Anybody?
I
think that I think that what folks were saying earlier, I think alluding to outreach to faith groups, could be a very productive opportunity for us. They not only have built-in membership groups, they also have a built-in leadership structure of either deacons or trustees or something of the like. I think the challenge is convincing them that this is a nonpartisan activity. This is not about the outcome of elections. This is about the safety, security, and the process of elections. But I think that we can thread that needle. And one of the groups, one of the kind of cornerstone groups that has a lot of reach is the Missoula Interfaith Collaborative. And I've got a couple personal contacts that are heavily involved with that group.
That sounds great. Student or educational organizations could be another category that we plug groups into. Todd, did you have something?
No, I thought those original categories you mentioned were good, adding to them the faith-based organizations.
Mhm.
If we have those, oh.
I loved also a little bit, kind of just directly pulling from what Christina had mentioned. We had really sought outreach towards underserved communities. And I think that with that, Christina hit the nail on the head. Oh, what was that? So Christina had hit the nail on the head with that. What we ran into is rural voters, and in Missoula, people who are hard to receive mail. To be very clear, I think that helps cover quite a few different groups, people whom are transitory, people whom may be between housing, people whom are college kids who've moved in and moved out of the dorms. That's one of the big aspects that kind of reaching out to, and rural voters.
And also contacts within the tribal community. So would we just show that as underserved communities?
I kind of broke it a little bit in there. I think that, yes, those all kind of fit in areas that we identified in Missoula as needing to do a little bit of extra outreach to. And I think, yeah, underserved.
Or underrepresented, or represented might be a better term.
Perfect. So what I've got civic, faith, student and educational, and then underrepresented, which would be rural, tribal, and then hard to receive mail. I'm like, let's just say exactly what I'm thinking here. Groups that are hard to get the mail to, a ballot in the mail to. And this can be some rural voters, many tribal voters, as well as many transitory people that we have in Missoula.
Okay. So this still seems kind of big to get. There's so many aspects that we need to start implementing. Why don't we just each take a stab at categorizing the groups that we've identified in that email list that I sent out, and then let's have a discussion maybe on how are we going to outreach? What method are we going to use? I mean, a PowerPoint presentation, that's not going to be very entertaining, potentially.
Yeah, and so I think that's great, because instead of everybody going through here, I'll send out what I've been putting together as a Excel document that lists out the different categories. We can plug them in, and I can kind of help compile that. We can make the best use of time here. I think if we take it back to this big idea, I think it really comes from how do we get the message out, what format, and where is the best spot to get it to? How do we get it to those who need it? And I think, just to echo this, one thing that we've heard here, that I've heard personally, small digestible videos. This is the hardest thing for me. I want to tell you the where, why, how, and how do I boil this down to a 2-minute video that will explain the basics of what you need to know. And I think that that is a really great method that we need to be looking at. Some things that we did this last year that were new and unique. We partnered with Clearwater Credit Union and provided out a list of dates, drop locations, and other information about the election to be given to all of their members when they completed a transaction. We also got those to many coffee huts, like Florence Coffee Company had those. And so people who received a coffee were given those as well. So these were just new ideas that we were trying in this last cycle. In addition to that, we did do some TV outreach, which is incredibly expensive. And we may have that opportunity in the future, but it did help reach a lot of new people. So those are just 3 ideas of outside of the box kind of thinking of how we can help present this material. We have a pretty good list of who, but how do we get this in a digestible fashion?
So Bradley, could some of those ideas, like what you had going with Clearwater Credit, could that be expanded to where all banks, all credit unions are handing out that information as far as the coffee place, if they have a cup insulator that we could have printed or they could print and hand out on the cups that has listings of polling places or drop-offs or something like that, and try to get larger segments of the community or various business types to jump in and participate.
Yeah, and I think that those can be growing. A lot of this we put together during the last election, looking for these ideas, and I don't see any reason not to grow them, understanding that, you know, if we print a cup holder for coffee shops, that's going to be a considerable outlay.
No, the coffee shops would print it out.
Oh, okay. Yep. And so just keeping in mind, you know, costs, because if they have one that says City Brew and we ask them to put one that says City Brew with all of this information in our website on the other side, can they afford to do so? And will they? That was a big reason that we pre-printed the cards to hand out, is that it was the least amount of push to them. However, with a whole outreach committee, if any of you know a coffee shop owner, what a great spot to start that discussion.
Denver?
Thanks, Susan. I think Todd was before me, but.
Yeah, I just wanted to say 2 things. Videos, I think, are very powerful. The longer ones, the ones you were talking about, 2 or 3 minutes, I think wherever possible, and I myself would volunteer for this, that members of this committee should present them, not just send them to a group and ask them to run them at a meeting, but be there, present it, and take questions or make comments. Secondly, if there could be, you know, television, of course, you know, you're not going to get prime time with this, but they are required to run a certain amount of PSAs, public service announcements. That could be a 30-second or 1 minute condensed version. And I know very well the Roxy would run something like that. And it's also possible that AMC or whomever bought those screens would be amenable to the same thing on films where they don't have slots sold. They could run it as a PSA. I've seen some PSAs at the theater, and I presume that before the next election, or at least federal election, we will have theaters again.
I love it, Todd. That's outside the box. I like that so much.
So I'm not sure who is next. Denver, Madison, Josh?
I think I was next. Thank you, Susan. Love the video idea as well. It's small, digestible, easy to share. That's great. I'm also wondering if what is being done to distribute that information at public assistance centers. when people go to the Human Resource Council to get help with their rent assistance or energy assistance, is there an engagement conversation? Are there materials for people to be able to give and take away at those interactions? That may be more of a question for Josh, but that's what kind of comes to my mind as I'm thinking about how to reach these hard to reach groups.
Yeah, yeah.
And Denver, I love it. As I see that and I'm like, okay, noted. These are great ideas. I see a ton of hands going up and I don't want to monopolize time, so I'll let you go. I'm just loving the comments.
Madison, did you have something?
I was actually going to say the same thing as Todd, that we could screen, and because the Roxy is starting to do outdoor screenings again. And then I don't know what's going on with campus lately, but they have a lot of movie screenings. We could show them there too before.
Great, thanks. And Josh?
Yeah, thanks a lot. So I just had two comments. One, Bradley, you were talking about how difficult it is to take something as complex as how a ballot becomes a counted vote and get it into 2 minutes. And you're totally accurate. And with a handful of the issues that would be associated with this, I think what we should do is hire someone. And this is a one-time expense. So it's not a big budget enhancement. It's just a one-time deal. We could RFP for it, decide that we want to make a small series of 2-minute videos based on the following concepts. And then somebody's going to interview you and interview the rest of your staff, and they may shoot 6 hours of video, and they're going to get it down to 3 minutes. And you don't do that, and we don't do that, and Nathan doesn't do that, because none of us know how to do that. But we have a professional do it, and then I think it would work. And I don't think it would be such a big expense that we want to be spooked. I think we could follow through on that. And then the other one that jumped to mind, I can't remember who was saying it, or Denver was. I think it's really good. People go through intake at the food bank, and we could have the same info available there. It's a short intake, and they could just hand them something and give them a few words. I think that would be reaching a hard to reach audience as well. So that's what I got. Thanks.
Great. Madison, did you have anything else? No? Christina, do you think there's a group at the university that might be interested in doing a video that they could get a grant from the county instead of hiring somebody out? And that would get the student involvement also.
I'm not really sure about that. I don't know what the video production program at is like these days. My assumption is that if we issue an RFP out of the county, there is an opportunity, right, for the university to apply for it. But most of the university film production, if it's not done by MPAN, is done by external entities.
Okay.
It might behoove you to reach out to some people at the PBS station there too, because I know Brianna had come and filmed a lot of what we're talking about in the background of the elections office, and for a special that she did for Montana PBS. And I'm sure they'd be able to point you in some good directions in that area.
Good idea. So of the group that's here, how many of you would be interested in giving a presentation to groups, to do Q&A after this video presentation is done?
I'm happy to do that.
I'd love to reach out to both the Missoula Area Central Labor Council and the Missoula Interfaith Collaborative.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to reach out to anybody that wants to see the video.
Maybe I should ask the question the other way around. Is there anybody who would not be comfortable with doing that? Okay, that's great.
I have the media center in the journalism school is often looking for student projects to put together video and workshops. That would be one, although I think a professional a professionally produced one would be best, but if that seems to be prohibitive, I know the media center at the journalism school is looking for student projects where they would have a whole team work on something like this.
Cool. Another area that we haven't really even touched on or mentioned is social media. Bradley, do you have anything to give us on that?
Yes, we hit social media exceptionally hard during the last election. Regularly seeing 5,000-6,000 people who saw those posts. We run into the same trappings. It's getting to the groups that already have this information, or it's shared amongst advocacy groups and they're seeing it, but we're not seeing that end result of, I just happened upon your Facebook page and it had all the information that I'd ever needed. And I never even called you because it was all right there. So we hit that really hard, and hats off to our whole communications team on that, because I couldn't get that on my own. But we were able to do some extensive outreach through social media and get that kind of shared out. I feel like of the differing outreach ways that we have, we did direct mailers, we did social media, and many of those did okay, but it's these outside of the box, these great ideas about how can we present something that's smaller, a little more digestible, and a little more personalized than that blast of, did you know that in a week it will close for regular registration, you have to come in person. So I think we're hitting that really good, relying heavily on our communications team on that. And I think that we need to continue all of these things that were so successful. I mean, we sent a direct mailer to every polling place voter, and we received a ton of those back. And so that was a big success where we could point to the information in that pamphlet. I think that really with this, it's how do we grow? How do we expand? How do we catch those groups that we aren't catching? And help instill that confidence in the process and help share this information specifically to areas that we aren't hitting. And I loved some of these when we were looking at underserved communities. HRC, Renter Center, Food Bank, Poverello, all these areas where we are missing people whom are regularly eligible and can do easy outreach with other county entities and other entities that are already doing similar sorts of outreach to dovetail off of that.
Hey, Brad. I apologize for not raising my hand. My Mac doesn't seem to like Teams very much, and it sort of reduced my window to just a little corner. I have a quick question, which is related to communication and outreach. So, Facebook is primarily people now that are like in their 40s, 50s, 60s. It's less younger generations. I am not up to snuff on all of the social media and outreach, but I do know some election groups are doing cool things with like TikTok. Indigenous TikTok is a very interesting place to go if you haven't spent time there. So I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to create maybe social media fellows or communications fellows with the county, with your office. We could do some recruitment at UM and with our partners, maybe from tribal colleges, related both to outreach to groups, but also some of these media assets that might be helpful, right? So some of the best things we see are like those viral pieces of a doctor talking about, what COVID-19 is. I'm sort of curious what the appetite would be.
Bradley, I think it's a great idea. I mean, super good idea.
Yeah, and normally what we've had in the past is a intern throughout the election cycle. With all of the changes this year, we did not opt to add in an intern into it. I feel like this is dual-fold. We can still, and next year in 2022 for the big year, I would love to have elections office have an intern to help us assist with some of these processes. But also we could look about a communications intern, somebody who understands what the heck TikTok is, because I don't, and really can help us focus in there. I got those notes down too, and I love it.
Bradley, is there any interaction amongst other counties as far as how they're addressing this issue, or are they?
Yes, so many counties shared our information. We were kind of tip of the spear on this. the Monty video, a lot of other areas in there. We were providing so much information out at timely areas that it was picked up at the state. And there is a statewide association that was sharing out information as well. And that statewide is votinginmontana.com. So you saw a couple of posts from them. But it was nice to have an independent group that we could reference to, because there is a demographic that feels that Missoula County is not doing it correctly. So we're not the best messenger. We can say, voting in Montana, your source from the election administrators across the state say this.
So is that through Secretary of State, or where is that just a separate organization?
So you've seen them in my email. It's funded through the Montana Association of Clerk and Recorders. It is a separate group that was set up specifically to do outreach around the unique circumstances with this election cycle, and grew out of previous areas. Rebecca Connors had helped a lot with that, and we were sharing a lot of our information over for them to kind of duplicate, because we were just, our communications department was really on the ball, and we did really good at that. But I'm like, yeah, no, we could expand social media to TikTok, Instagram, any of these other areas that we don't have, and really try and grow that.
Any other comments, suggestions, ideas? So where do we want to proceed to? How do we want to proceed next? Hello, everybody went quiet. So Bradley, you were going to take the categories and then plug in the groups?
You bet. So here's what I've got. And I'd be more than happy to plug in the groups and send it out to you guys to say, hey, here's how I put them in there. Spare everybody a little bit of work. I've got your email. I've got an Excel spreadsheet I've started. I think, Susan, let's go with that. That'll make it an easy area where Nathan and I can take this, really compile those together, send them out to all of you and say, hey, here's what we came up with. Help us look, does this match? From there, we really need to go in and get some content to do this outreach around. Now, we'll have a little bit coming up about some of the upcoming school elections and areas like this that we could see about, hey, will this work to get this out to this group or this connection? But I think that would be a good area to start. And then really identifying some of the content that we want to have here at the elections, working with those areas of specialization and stating, okay, now I have this video that talks about how a ballot becomes a vote. Let's get it out there. Who can take on that organization? Who can do that presentation?
So one thing I think would be useful is in a 2-minute time span, you're not going to, I don't think we'd be able to describe in any detail how a ballot actually becomes a vote. So I'm thinking that perhaps that needs to be broken down into sections of how do I get my vote? How do I get my ballot? What's early registration? What's late registration? How is my ballot processed once it hits elections? What happens to it after the election? How is everything verified? But it seems like there's different segments of the election process that different videos could be done about.
Absolutely. And I think that that's exactly it. I think we need both. I love the nitty-gritty details. Susan, I know you love the nitty-gritty details. And then there's the other group that wants the really broad stroke overview. And I think that Josh hit it on the head. I'll start working on something, looking at maybe a request for proposal or a budget amendment, and start this process to go forward. And let's see if we can get somebody who is a professional in this realm who can help us narrow it down. I can give them the nuts and bolts. I can give them exactly what they're looking for in how the process works. But maybe somebody who has a little more understanding and knowledge could take this topic that I can't do in 2 minutes, rough it out to 2 minutes, and then boy, when you hit how do I request a ballot, you can go into the detailed video there. It's 3 minutes long that talks just about that section.
Okay.
And so that's kind of how I see it going forward. And I think that that's a good one. Let me also just ping out there, give me video ideas. So I'll put together a video idea section. I already started typing some of your notes. I'll have to go back to the recording to grab them all. But what content should we make? What groups do we have where? And then really nailing down who the best contact is shortly after that, and working to get these created out and help put out this information and share it, knowing that this is going to be a little bit of a longer term project going through the school election and some other areas, but how can we tag in some and pilot it for the school election?
Okay.
So I can get that email out. Closed captions, yes. Great call, Madison. I love it.
Hey, Brad, can I offer one quick thing for you to consider, maybe for our next meeting?
Absolutely.
In forgive me for the Arizona references. I just have done a lot of research there. In Yavapai County, historically a red voting county, their elections office hosts a series of tours of the facility and of ballot, like using a a cookie ballot to process, to invite people in from the community, right? Bring them into the place, right? We have this nice new elections building, but to show them, not only through a video, the path that a ballot might take, but in the guts of the process, what's going on. And having talked with the folks there who've really been pioneers in some election administration work, they found that it's a successful way for them to outreach, especially to older populations. Their county population's quite old. So something to think about, to consider having opportunities for public tours or select thought leader groups to see what happens behind the scenes.
Yeah, great. I love it. We do that informally, one-off observers. How can we turn this with our presentation, our discussion, into something that pulls together a few groups of people to say, hey, yes, let's walk you through it? Because normally it's somebody who is upset who comes in and we're like, oh, all of our processes are open to the public. Let's show you. And how can we build that into more of a hands-on, come and see this process and get it in a way that doesn't interrupt the incredibly fast flow? I mean, we had voters who turned in a ballot and said, hey, I looked online and it doesn't show up and I turned it in 2 hours ago. How can we build that in, accommodate it with our flow? And I think by promoting it and scheduling it, it works out even better for us.
So I don't know when it is, but why couldn't we do an election education day on Flag Day or something like that? Take a holiday that's not like 4th of July where people are doing fireworks and getting together with family, but something that's Americana, and turn it into election education day.
So we in the county like to utilize National Voter Registration Day as an educational opportunity day. That's usually in September, right before the bigger elections are coming forward, like the municipal this year or the federal in the future year. With so many third-party groups that are actively involved in voter registration, having us do a voter registration drive at the university was not helpful. So we've kind of got that policy, and we can build on that too to really hit National Voter Registration Day. And what does that mean? In Missoula County, that means that we're going to educate about the elections process as well. We did this and went to the university in a few years ago, forgive me, and talked about you can have your ballot sent from home. Are you a voter from Alaska? What does that do to your permanent fund derivative? What happens if you move out of the dorms and your ballot, if you don't update your address, what happens to your ballot? So yes, we can continue that forward and hit that and really kind of codify that to make it the day for elections or another day. I'm not married to that specific day.
Okay. Well, I just searched for Flag Day and nothing came up on my Mac calendar, so maybe it doesn't exist anymore. Okay, so
Bradley? Oh.
Yes, sir.
I was wanted to piggyback on that just a little bit. Sorry. I think it's a really great idea, and my really great idea sentiment is coming from the response we had to the Civic Academy, the Citizens Academy that kind of went where groups of people signed up for this, and then they basically sat through a handful of classes and tours at city and county government. Now, this sounds as dry as dust, right? Like, who would want? There were like 40 people, and it was full, and they had to get on a waiting list. So I think this is a great idea, and my free to ignore suggestion would do like 3 of these in the evenings across the winter and summer, not during a peak election season. And I bet you'll get 20, 30 people signing up for each one. And it takes an hour and a half. You do an extensive tour, you talk people through it, you let them handle things. I think it's a great idea, and I think you'd get really good response.
Yeah, I love it. And I don't want to get too far. I have so much to fill all of you in about on the EAC. I'm going to try and catch it with the main meeting, but we'll have some upcoming opportunities where people feel like the process isn't done correctly to educate voters. And how can we dovetail all of this in together? And this can really be a kind of a framework for a lot of this information to put together. I've got quite a list here. I think from here, what I'd like to do is just send it out, ask for more information. And our big takeaway from here, Todd, I'm trying to kind of gear you up on this and be mindful of time, is, we really took a look at what groups do we want, where do we want to reach out, and how can we do unique outreach. So I'll put together the groups into subcategories to say, I'll put together some unique outreach and ask for extra information and feedback from you guys. And as we get together and we're working on getting back in for the meeting in April, I think our big update is we're coming together with a list of new things we want to be doing. We're coming together with a list of places we want to be reaching out to. And we're going to start preparing them and getting them going as we hit time to build each of these in. And a lot of this can be built really well around the school election. If we need to record something or have some extra info, with the upcoming school election, we can build some of this together because we see a lot of interest on federal years, but this is the perfect time to prepare that material.
Okay. So one other question I had is if there's anybody who has a burning desire to be facilitator of these meetings, I just sent an email to Bradley and he snagged me for this meeting. But if somebody else really would like to be facilitator, that is fine with me. Or not.
And I try and do some outreach and work with you a little bit to get you prepared here too. You're not totally on your own, right, Susan?
Oh yeah, yeah. There's good support as always from Bradley and crew.
And so maybe that's a great idea to help share this and share this participation. Maybe what we look at doing is saying for the next subcommittee meeting that we'll schedule between our regular meetings, we seek a new facilitator, and I'll help gear you up and we can kind of learn a little bit about facilitating these subcommittee meetings and shuffle them around. I feel confident that in elections, we can always take on note taking because it's really helpful with us and having access to the recordings and all of the SharePoint items. But I love that idea and I'll put that in the follow-up too.
Okay. So does anybody want to jump in for the next outreach subcommittee meeting? Todd, your picture is the only one on the screen for me. You want to jump in?
Well, I was going to be the reporter, but yeah, I could do it if nobody else wants to. Sure.
Okay. So I'll hand the baton off to you for the next meeting.
All right.
Yeah, and then maybe we could do kind of, Susan, we could have you do reporting, and then we could shuffle and train in somebody else for the next one.
Yeah, that'd be great. Josh, did you have something?
Nope, I'm all good. I just forgot to unraise my hand. Sorry.
Okay. I thought maybe dinner was ready, so.
Yeah, can we see a picture of what you
We
made?
got to get it done before they all come back.
Okay, so does anybody else have anything else they want to add? Our next EAC meeting is April 13th. When subsequent to that, would the subcommittee like to get together again?
It would be after April 13th, right?
Yes.
My recommendation, just to give you guys a little bit of an update, would be after April, we're going to be heading into the school election through till May. To give us a little time to close down and actually get some more stuff together, with these meetings being scheduled out quarterly for the main meeting, I would push towards May, possibly end of May or beginning of June. Now, that's not to say that that's not the only thing that we can do. We can keep some stuff pushing forward via email. I can get together some more information going on this and lists, but that would be a time frame that would work out good on Nathan and our side. Now, to be fair, you guys can run with this.
Let's see here. 326 is recruitment. Research is 4-5, 413. Yeah. Whoops.
What's the election date, Bradley?
May 4th.
May 4th?
And then closeout should be wrapped up by the end of the month, including all of our billing. But, you know, and we don't need to be fully out of that next election to jump back into this. We could do later in May. That would work out just fine too.
Like, is May 18th? Is that too soon? That's 2 weeks post-election?
I'm just checking one last thing because we will have a canvas meeting for that. And it's not May.
You go into the next week, 25th.
The 25th?
I mean, that sounds a little like it gives a little more breathing room after the election.
Yeah, and that's almost the end of the month.
We will have a conference for voter database improvement that may eat up my time, but I can always jump in at 5 o'clock.
Okay. How's that work for everybody else who's on?
That works for me.
Okay, so we'll go with May 25th at 5?
Sure.
Okay. And Bradley, a question for you on that election. When you guys are doing the ballot processing, I had wondered about some of the EAC members coming in and shadowing a ballot through the process. Can you open that up as an opportunity for EAC members?
Absolutely. Ballots are going to mail out on the 15th. Yep, 15th of April, I think. Forgive me, I'm doing this in my head. And then we'll be processing a ton of ballots. The best time will be very close to election day. And since everything is on one campus on election day, I'm sure that I could take a time and get a chance to meet everybody, because then you can see every step of that process. You can see the ballots being returned, scanned in, signature verified, checked, opened, double checked, opened again, double checked again, sent to counting, confirmed for the last time, and stored.
That'd be great.
I got to jump back into my notes, Susan, and write that one down.
Okay.
And that I'm going to do, obviously, to the whole EAC.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, I will shoot out a meeting invite through Kayla. We always have to work closely with Josh to make sure he will be available. So there may be just a quick update to that. But I'll get that all going here. I'll get this stuff typed up and have it out by the end of the week for you guys.
Sounds great. Anything anybody else has? Final notes, comments?
Great job, Susan, and thanks, Bradley, and thanks everybody.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, I love having this EAC. Thank you all.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.